Aloha, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. You are joining Mental Health America of Hawaii for a presentation on self-care. I am Dr. Mestisa. I'm the program director, and I am being joined with my co-facilitator, our wonderful intern, Noah Porotesano. We will be recording today, so this is going to be available on our YouTube channel later on next week, and also it's available on Facebook Live. The videos do not capture the chat, so just be aware if you want to ask questions to put them into the chat, but also know that will remain anonymous. If you just want an extra level of security for your questions, please feel free to direct them just to the presenters. After this presentation, we are going to email everyone who attended a PDF of the slides. I know there's going to be a lot of information, so don't worry about having to take notes or jot down any of the crisis resource numbers. You will be getting them when you get our slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Perfect. And we'll go ahead and hand it off to Noah.
Aloha, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. So first off, I'll start by reading a quote on the right. "The best way out is always through," by Robert Frost. Okay, so our presentation is talking about mental wellness, some tips and strategies for surviving and thriving in today's society. So next slide, please. So here are some key core concepts that we will be discussing for today's presentation. We will be talking about self-care myths and tips, the role of grief, some mental health strategies, pre-existing mental health challenges, and some resources for community members. So starting off, self-care myths. Our first myth, I need to be productive. So a lot of people feel the need to be productive, especially right now, since we're all working remotely, that we have so much time on our hands that we need to do big projects, such as learning another language or finishing that home construction project. And if you're able to do those things, absolutely pursue it. But for many of us, we are not able to. Productivity should include self-care. Self-care is not selfish at all. So we need to appreciate whatever ways productivity looks like in regards to self-care, and whether that is doing the laundry that's been sitting in the corner of your room for about a week, or finishing that big essay. It's just important that we appreciate the small victories. Going off about this topic, we tend to view this time as a vacation, and that's not the case. Right now, we are living in a very scary situation, and it's filled with uncertainty. So we just need to learn to appreciate our productivity, whether it be big or small. Our next point is, I shouldn't feel grief, sadness, anger, confusion. It's important that we realize that we shouldn't compare our emotions to others. We all have our own thoughts, ideas, experiences, and it's important that we validate our emotions and validate that. And with these emotions, it's also important that we learn how to process them in a healthy, positive way. And our next myth is, I don't need self-care. That's not the case at all. Everyone needs self-care. A wonderful analogy that my co-presenter, Dr. G, has made is comparing self-care to a bank investment. It's expected that you invest in your bank periodically. You may not need it now, but you may need it during a rainy day. The same applies to self-care. You may not need it now, but it's good to have it when you do need it. Our next myth is, I will only feel this way once. It's normal for our emotions to fluctuate. These are normal responses to feel anger, to feel sadness, sometimes simultaneously. These are very normal responses, and they're valid. We're in a very abnormal situation right now with this whole pandemic. So however you feel, however is important. Our last myth is we shouldn't tell the kids anything. It's important that we tell our keiki everything. Um, but it's important that we tell them in a very developmentally appropriate way. As anyone who's dealt with kids before, they are very observant people. They're sponges. They pick up all our surroundings. Sometimes they pick up on things that we don't even notice. And so it's important that we model that positive behavior. And by modeling this behavior, we're able to give them the tools and resources to deal with these kind of emotions. Next slide, please.
Was on mute. So one of the things that we just wanted to briefly touch upon is this concept of grief. The reason that we're talking about grief is I think that when we look at that word, we often think it's about a loss of someone. And unfortunately, for many people in our community, we are experiencing the loss of people at this moment for many different reasons. But at the core of grief is the loss of something. If you think about it like that, then our entire community is being impacted. This could be the loss of your schedule from day to day, being able to go to work and spend time with your coworkers, being able to see your children leave to go to school and be able to interact with their peers and get that support from their teachers, in life from person to person. Could also be an expectation that you had about an event that was coming up, these big life transitional pieces. So that could be an anniversary. It could have been a birthday, a graduation. There were so many things because now it's a very long time period that we're being impacted for. So there's an opportunity for there to be several life events that have been interrupted. When we look at grief as a loss of something, then you can really see how it's possible that you also might be going, or someone that you care about also might be going through kind of a grief process. If you have a pre-existing history of trauma, that can also get triggered up in moments that have similar emotional pieces. And what I mean by that is to say, if you or someone that you love has been through a history that has trauma in it, and during that trauma, they did go through grief, they did feel scared and confused, having that same emotional experience now, where they're going through grief for a different reason, but they're also still feeling afraid and confused, it can link those two events. So we always want to make sure that we check in with people who we know or with ourselves. If they do have that pre-existing history of trauma, we want to make sure that we are supporting them getting self-care, where we're using our own self-care, and that we're learning coping skills if we don't have the ones we need yet. It's important to know that we all cope differently. I think that there's an idea of what grief should look like. And there are going to be some days that are harder than others, and you're not quite sure why. There are going to be some days that you feel good, you feel okay, and that's fine too. It's a complex emotional experience to a very complex situation. So validate those emotions, validate them for yourself and for the people you care about, and just understand they're going to cope differently than you. What feels good to me might not feel good to someone else. If I'm going to sit around and read a piece of classical literature, that could absolutely be experienced by someone else as being really intense and not pleasurable. And that's fine. Figure out what feels good to you. We also grieve differently. Some people are going to want to reach out and get supported by the people around them and really talk about what's happening, while other people will go through a more internalized process. Maybe they're journaling about how they're feeling, they're creating art with how they're feeling, and neither one of those processes are better than the other, they're just different. So we really need to respect how people are moving through this, as long as it's healthy and they're able to validate those emotions and move through those emotions. So that's what we mean when we say we just want to honor the process. So when I was looking early on about applying grief in this much wider sense, one of the big people that you see talked about in terms of research is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And while her model isn't always very evidence-based, it is a very good frame, a very good structure for us to look at our own experiences. And when we apply that to the quarantine and the pandemic, we're going to look at these 5 main stages. So the first one would be denial, just having a really hard time accepting that this is what's happening right now, that it's happening in your community. And you do see people still in that phase denying what their experience, denying that the community is going through this. And it is part of what we look at when we talk about working through grief. People might be experiencing anger or anxiety. That's that feeling of losing control, that feeling of helplessness, like what we're doing isn't working, the numbers aren't moving. People getting just really frustrated over not feeling like they have control. But it's really important, and we're going to talk about this later on in the presentation. It's really important to actually recognize what you do have control over and to put your energy there, because there are places that you can make changes and feel more empowered. Bargaining, that could be, when we put it into this new context, looking for sharing stories. These could be on the extreme ends of things that are happening for the positive or for the challenging, but it's looking at how other places are handling it, other people are handling it, and then trying to figure out where you fit and why can't we be here, or why aren't we there. Then we look at depression. That can be a feeling of feeling increased sadness, again, feelings of grief. And then, of course, acceptance. And we are going to talk about radical acceptance in detail, because I think it's so crucial to how we keep moving forward and how we can support one another through this process. And I'm sure you've all heard the phrase settling into the new version of new. And really what this is about is adapting. I would probably at this point, looking at this slide, say I would change this information to learning about radical acceptance and learning about the importance of adapting to what is happening here. Those stages aren't going to happen one after another. They're not linear. So you may have days where you're just feeling really sad, and the next day you feel like you're in a good place and accepting these are the changes we need to make. But then you go back later to feeling really frustrated, and that's okay. The reason I wanted to highlight this grief process is because it's ongoing. We continue to have to make sacrifices for our community, for the vulnerable people in our community, for ourselves and our families. And sometimes I'll just be really blunt and transparent. Sometimes we feel burnt out. Sometimes we might even feel, I hesitate to say, but sometimes we might feel resentful when other people aren't making those same sacrifices. But again, we just need to focus in on what we can do to support our community and what we can do for ourselves and our families.
So here are some self-care tips that you can use to apply to your daily lives. Our first tip is to validate your emotions. I already talked about this, and I hope that you guys already have information to validate yourselves. So our second tip is to stay connected. We as humans are by nature very social people, but what are we going to do when we're advised to socially distance from one another? So what's important to realize is that we need to physically distance ourselves from one another, but that does not necessarily mean that we need to socially distance from one another. So what does that mean, not social distancing, when you can't meet to talk to someone? Well, I would say that it's important to check in with others. Send a text. Send that text to that friend you haven't seen since March. Text that your extended family. Check in with them. Just be socially active. Maintain those healthy, strong connections. And by maintaining those healthy, strong connections, you're able to build yourself a strong support system that you can rely on. Our next point is don't overcheck. And when I say don't overcheck, I am talking about sources that tend to put a strain on our mental health. Strictly talking, it's important not to overcheck news media outlets. Constantly checking out throughout the day is not good for us. So it's important that we limit the number of times we update ourselves with what's currently happening in the world. Our next point, focus on the helpers. So one of the positives that came out this whole experience from social distancing since COVID is the increased sense of community, all of us coming together and doing our parts to help out one another. By building this sense of community, there's hope for a future that we can come together and face obstacles as a community and overcome them. Our next point is check on essential workers and the vulnerable people in your circle. This ties back to staying connected with others. Our last point is to follow a schedule. So humans by nature, Humans by nature love routines. We love consistency in our lives. So by having a schedule, we are able to take back some control that we have lost due to this pandemic. So by doing these things, we can have a sense of normalcy back in our lives. Continuing with the tips, schedule and self-care. Self-care is an important part of our lives, as I hope many of you realize so far. So just take out 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your day to incorporate self-care. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And self-care generally does work, so it's important that we incorporate it into our lives. Next point, use social media responsibly. We'll be talking about later in the presentation, so please stay tuned. Our next point, identifying online resources. It's important that we identify online resources and we utilize them to the full potential. We will, near the end of the presentation, we'll gladly provide you with some online resources. So again, please stay tuned. Our next point, invest in yourself. As I said before, self-care is not selfish. It's important that we, again, referring to the bank investment analogy, that we invest sometimes in ourselves, that we set aside some time for ourselves. Again, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. Our next bullet point, using coping skills. Coping skills is different for everyone. For me, I like to keep a diary to keep track of my emotions, to see how much I'm growing as a person. Sometimes, so just find what works for you. And if you have trouble finding what works for you, it's okay to receive help from a mental health professional. It's okay to ask for help, to find what works for you, to find what benefits you. Our next bullet point is to reach out and give back. So studies have shown that people experience higher levels of happiness giving gifts compared to receiving gifts. And it's all about building that sense of community, about helping each other out. And so this can look like, oh, I'm gonna cook some dinner for my family today, or, oh, I'll take out the trash. Just doing acts of kindness. Also, it's important to realize that you should not give out too much or overexert yourself, because that can lead to feelings of resentment. And right now, that's something that we do not need in our lives, especially right now during this pandemic. The next 2 points, practicing mindfulness and getting to a flow. We'll be talking about that later presentation, so please stay tuned.
Now we're going to talk just a little bit, because this is part of self-care, is how we use social media. So you're going to see the graphic on the right that basically says make social media sandwiches. Most people ask me what that is. And the reason I think it's really important to use it, it's a great communication skill. You can use it outside of social media, but basically what it is if you think about a sandwich, and you think about social media and you're wanting to post something that's a little bit more challenging, but you really think it's going to be helpful for the community or the people that you know, what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to create the bread on either side of that piece. So make sure that you're posting something funny or positive before you make that post, and something funny or positive after you make that post. So what it's doing is it's creating a balance. So even when we're sharing challenging information, we're also sharing positivity. I know that many of you have gone online, you've gone on social media, and you've probably been inundated with a lot of different information, and maybe even walked away feeling like your mood has dropped. That's why it's so crucial to make those social media sandwiches for yourself and your own posts, so that we can keep uplifting our community. It's hard to feel engaged and it's hard to feel resilient when you keep having that feeling of, hopelessness or helplessness, and how is things getting better. We want to make sure that we're sharing reputable information, which can be difficult to figure out. But you just look at those websites. You can Google how different media companies where they kind of skew their information, because there are outside organizations that do meta studies that look at this kind of big overall place about the legitimacy of the information being shared. It's hard sometimes to figure out, but I always say, like, when in doubt, don't put it out. Make sure you do your research and back it up so you make sure you're sharing really good information that's up to date before you post. So this could be a little bit like that Socratic principle of, when to share information, which, Socrates would say, like, is it good? Is it helpful? And that's really what we want to ask ourselves here. Before I'm posting something, I want to ask myself, does this help inform people? Does it help support other people? And if you can say yes to either one of those, then it's a great post to share. That if you see resources that are available online, even if they're not usable for you or someone that that you still share them because there's someone in the community who could use them, it just might not see them. And making sure, because it's easy. It's an easy time to spend a lot of time being distracted and doing passive interests that don't require us to be too engaged or can feel very overwhelming. So make sure that you're limiting your time on social media. I'm guilty of it, as I'm sure a lot of you are, of spending a little bit more time on social media, getting information, updates, and using it actually in a vehicle to stay connected to other people when you have to physically distance. But also remember, you still need to spend that time doing self-care for yourself outside of social media. One of the things that we talk about, and you're going to hear if you attend any of our trainings, you're going to hear me talk a lot about mindfulness and staying present. The reason I think mindfulness is such an important and crucial skill to have is because the past has already happened and we can't change it. We can't rework what's already happened and that we're already in this moment. The future is unknown. I promise you, if you were looking back, if you made those 2019 New Year's resolutions, none of this was on there. A lot of this was not on there. That the future is sometimes unpredictable, and we're learning that every single day. But where you can do your work is right now, in this hour, in this day, in this moment, right now, making a different choice, whether it's to take 5 minutes to deep breathe, whether it's to send a text to someone that you haven't talked to in a while, but you really enjoy talking to them, or it's for you to make a self-care plan that you're going to start working on as you move forward because you need it. The work is done right now. So stay focused on the right now as much as possible. One of the skills here is radical acceptance. And I actually want to talk about that skill in detail in just a minute because I think it's so important to mindfulness. Another way for you to kind of stay present is really to ground your senses in the present, to meditate or pray, go for a walk, and just really know that you're 100% in that moment. It's very easy to multitask. I always say, like, I'm a great multitasker, but reality is I only have 100% of attention. Reality really is I probably have more like 60 to 70 because I'm already distracted. But let's say, hypothetically, I do have 100%. If I have four different things happening, they each are getting only a slice of that attention. And whether I'm good at managing that or not, it still means I am setting a standard for being distracted and being put in many different places. And if I start to feel anxious, then that's going to be even harder to manage. Work is work, juggling multiple roles, because that's what a lot of people are doing right now. That's unchangeable. But any moment that you can take to just single task, whether it's sitting in front of your child, putting your phone on the side and just making that great eye contact and really getting involved in their play, whether it's having a great conversation with your partner, enjoying the meal that's right in front of you without the TV also being on, whatever you can do to stay fully in one moment, try to practice it and find as many as you can, because it does help with anxiety. It does help with you feeling more empowered. Try to be accessible, responsive, and engaged when you're having conversations. Accessible just means, like, yes, you can call me, I can talk to you, I'm not going to be distracted. When you talk to me, I respond in kind, I ask you questions, I validate how you feel. I could do little things like, and then ask you follow-up questions. It makes you feel very heard. And then I'm engaged, I'm not distracted with my phone. So as much as possible, practice those skills, because that's really what makes a great listener. We have a little mindfulness bingo graphic. You can find this on our website. I just wanted to create something really fun for people if they wanted to practice mindfulness, to kind of as that reminder as they're checking off those boxes throughout a week, to know that they're getting some of that into their day to day. I mentioned this that I really wanted to talk about radical acceptance. And the reason I want to talk about it is it's so easy to say we should radically accept something, but it's really hard to fully grasp what that means and practice it in the day to day. If you're familiar with the Serenity Prayer, that is an example of radical acceptance. But at its core, what radical acceptance really means is in a situation, any situation, even a relationship, look at what is unchangeable. What do I have control to change? Or what do I not have control to change? If you can't control something, if you can't change something, let it go. That energy that you're putting there is better served somewhere else. But that's hard for us to admit, right? It's hard for us to say sometimes, like, that's out of my control. But the more insightful and honest you are with yourself about those situations, the more you get that power back. So then you're going to look at that situation, you're going to ask yourself, is that something, this part of it, is that something that's changeable? If it is changeable, put your energy there. Don't waste your energy somewhere. It's not going to make a difference. A lot of us do find ourselves doing that, especially when we're thinking about the past, what could have been, should have been, would have been. But again, the past is unchangeable. Part of radical acceptance is accepting reality, moving away from making statements like, that wasn't fair, or that's not the way it should be. If I can't change it, it just is what it is. And I'm not saying that you're agreeing to what happened. I want to be really clear when I say that. It doesn't mean that you like the situation or the parts that are unchangeable. You're just saying, for my own self-care, I need to focus on part that I can change and make decisions based on whether or not that's enough to keep me here, whether that makes enough sense for me and my own like self-love to stay in a situation if this much is unchangeable. And you can start to see it's going to create boundaries. It's going to give you new insights about situations and relationships. And it's going to help you make decisions based on what can actually change in it. That's why I love radical acceptance. It gives you so much information. It is a daily choice. It's a daily choice, and you have to keep practicing it. Let's say you wake up, you have no skills in changing a tire, you had all these amazing plans, and you walk outside and your tire is flat. Well, you're going to be upset. Validate that. But what you do between finding that it's flat and validating that that's frustrating or disappointing and calling someone to fix it, that's in your power, right? I can either decide that it ruined my whole day and then operate as if it ruined my whole day, or I can say, you know what, it is what it is. The tire is flat and I'm annoyed, and that's okay. But until they get here to fix it, I'm going to drink a cup of tea, I'm going to listen to my favorite music, and I'm just going to adapt to what's happening in the best way for me. So you see, again, it's a daily practice and it's a choice to really think about how to shift into a new mindset. When we deny that something is happening, when we deny that that is unchangeable, it actually is functional. It's painful to not be able to change certain parts of situations. And so we avoid looking at it. But part of self-care really is being honest with yourself and what's happening in your life so that you can make choices that serve you. And, I love that Noah pointed it out. Self-care isn't selfish, even when other people give you that information and tell you that it is, because that's a boundary issue. You're saying, I'm not okay. I need to take care of myself. And maybe they're feeling like, well, I need to be taken care of too. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. And that's why when Noah was talking about that bank account analogy, it's perfect. Yeah, deposit as much as you can so it's there when you need to withdraw. And you might not have it, and that's okay. Just be honest with the person in front of you and say that you don't. They might not like it, but that's uncontrollable, right? That's for them to figure out what they need to do. Fighting that takes a lot of energy. And again, I just say, put it where it can do change. This is radical acceptance can be seen as an alternative to forgiveness. I know that when people are moving out of their past, that sometimes when they've been through trauma, when they've had difficulty in their past, that sometimes people say, well, you just need to forgive and move on. You just need to forgive and move on. And if that's part of what you need, I support that 100%. But not everybody is going to be able to do that in a place to want to do that. And it might not be necessary for their healing process. So an alternative to I forgive you and I'm moving on is I couldn't change that situation. I did my best. And now I'm going to focus on me right now. So you can see it just eliminated talking about where you're at in that moment in terms of forgiveness and really focused on what you need in the moment for healing. That's why we sometimes say this is an alternative. But again, radical acceptance, a really big concept that can be absolutely transformative.
So we will be talking about flow. As many may have, this is also known as getting to the flow or getting to the zone, to the groove, however it is. It is described as being fully immersed in a process and activity. Okay, just get into the groove of what you're doing. Sometimes we get so invested in this that time flies by, like the hours can pass by when we get into this. So we need to find what works for you, whoever it may look like. Whatever activity you choose to do, it's also important that it is a non-passive pursuit, meaning something that engages us, that stimulates the creativity in our mind. So that doesn't mean what binging the new show that just came out on Netflix. The next point is to increase the mastery of it. Through repetition of our activity, we're able to better at it and be good at it. It feels good to be good at things. And that's the point of self-care, is that is to feel good. This goes along with the increasing joy and creativity, that we experience feelings of joy and creativity when we do these activities. And one good thing about getting through the flow is that it creates a positive challenge. It creates a challenge where there's no stress involved. That stress is the last thing that we need right now, especially with all that's going on during this pandemic. Some other things about getting through the flow, that it improves your attention and concentration. That you're able to focus on one thing and one task at hand, and you're able to complete it. Example that I like to do is to write poetry. It gives me control of what I want to do. I could write something as simple as a short haiku to a whole sonnet. It's just something that gives you back some control, some normalcy back in your lives. It's important that we get as much of this as possible. So set aside some time for yourself to partake in this activity that you want to do, and make the space for it. And it's important that we remove distractions so we don't get interrupted. Nothing is more frustrating when you're doing something so invested, then all of a sudden you have something come up that distracts you and you're just out of mood, not in the mood to do anymore, you're just out of funk. So this can be something like putting the dogs outside or turning your phone off. This may sound cheesy, but art is a form of healing. Art can heal. It can help. It's good for us to de-stress, something that can stimulate our minds. So just please make sure to invest some time into get into the flow. Please.
Well, oftentimes when we're talking about self-care, we get asked about how to use self-care with other family members. And so I just wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about Keiki self-care, what to do with our little ones when they seem to also be feeling stressed. No one was talking about how insightful, like little sponges that they are, and that is so true. Even if we don't tell them what's happening, they know something is happening. They can feel that shift in the room. I worked with children who had grown up in very chaotic homes, and when they were able to get a little bit older and talk about what they had gone through, they would actually hear the difference in the sound of a footfall. That is just how perceptive that they are, and that really taught me something powerful, which is we need to be able to talk to our keiki in appropriate ways about what's happening because they know something is happening. So even with this big kind of scary abstract concept of COVID and quarantine, make sure you're talking to them about what's appropriate. If I'm working with a child who's much younger and they don't know what's happening with COVID or the quarantine, you can make it something as simple as, you know what, when we get sick, what do we need to do? And the child would say, oh, we need to rest. We need to stay home and rest. And then you say, yes, and that's what we're all doing. we're all staying home, we're all resting because we're making sure that we're supporting everyone who was feeling sick or could get sick. And you see how it's very simple in the concept, but if you're working with a much younger child, they can grab that, they can understand that. And you just want to make sure that it just makes sense for wherever they are. We don't want them to feel scared. We want them to feel very empowered. There is so few things that they can do, but making sure if they're feeling overwhelmed and they don't know how to like help because they're seeing all these scary or hearing all these scary things, that they can do small things. They can create get well cards for the different islands if one of the islands they heard is doing, having higher numbers or they're really struggling, and they can just put that into a special get well box that they make themselves. They can make a wish box and put in wishes for how they hope that things move forward, and that actually makes them feel more empowered. They can paint rainbows and put them in their windows to remind everyone that's what happens after a storm, that we're going to get through this together. It's just about giving them a sense of power and then helping them manage their schedules. It is very difficult right now with multiple roles. And sometimes, let's be honest, it's just easier to let that schedule slip a little bit instead of having that tug of war, instead of exhausting yourself. But also remember, their concept of schedules is very different than our concept. And if you just spend a couple of days letting that schedule slip, it's really challenging to get it back on board again. So as much as you can, help them manage their schedules, even if putting visuals up would be helpful. For our wee bitty ones, you can have a picture of a shower, a picture of teeth brushing, of a book for school, and you can just, when they ask you like, oh, now what, you go, what does it say, right? And it's just the visual pictures. So you can use this really for any range of children and just make sure that it fits them. There's so many online resources right now. And I think that is the brilliant thing that has happened, is this awareness that our Keiki are spending more time at home, that parents are becoming educators for their children at home. And so people are recognizing that. They're creating really cool resources and videos. You can go to different aquariums and zoos. They have walkthroughs. I'm guilty of watching this one aquarium. I probably should share this, but I like to do it. This one aquarium who has these adorable penguins, and they just kind of cruise through the aquarium. They go on these adventures, and I love watching it. I don't know, it's very soothing to me. But they have those kinds of things that they didn't have at the beginning of the year, because everyone is realizing on a worldwide level that we have children being impacted, and they're creating amazing things that are available. And just going online looking for those tours of the museums, all those things can really be brought home to have your keiki have even a more rounded experience. Also building those emotional toolboxes. So we're going to talk about what an emotional toolbox is for just a second, because I want everyone to have an emotional toolbox. What an emotional toolbox is basically like this metaphorical box where you put your self-care and your coping skills in it. So if you know how to deep breathe or do diaphragmatic breathing, that's a toolbox item. And right now you're going, Dr. G, I have a 4-year-old. They're not diaphragmatic breathing. And I would say, but they could. And so hear me out for a second. If you have one of those bubble wands, you can even make a wand at home. You can use dish soap. There's so many easy recipes online to create it. If you don't already have it, you don't want to leave the house to get it, have them do big bubble breaths. So say, take a really deep breath in with me and make the biggest bubble you can. And they'll do it because it's fun. And who doesn't love bubbles? But what you have taught them, if they're pulling it from their stomach, is an early form of diaphragmatic breathing. It's that simple. You can have them sit on the floor like a frog and then like a frog, right? And now you have them in a very like comfortable sitting position, and you have them working on a little bit of that meditation mantra work, but they're really just having fun, and they're really just enjoying being like a frog for the moment. There are ways to adapt the skills that you as an adult have into a keiki form that they're really going to enjoy. And when in doubt, dance it out, right? They have so much energy, and sometimes just giggling and laughing and dancing with someone that they love so much can help them reground, recenter, and get them back onto a positive mind frame. Keiki mindfulness, because I've been talking about mindfulness, can be done too. And that's really about just staying in the present, whether it is having them eat an orange, close their eyes, and imagine where that orange came from. You're a seed in the ground. You're a little sprout coming out. And you could walk them through the whole process. They're a tree. The tree has oranges. What does the farmer look like who's coming to pick them? Have them tell you what the farmer looks like. Have them tell you how far the truck had to drive to get to the store to put the orange there, right? And then they take a bite. And all of a sudden, you've done sensory grounding and they've enjoyed the process. You can also have them breathe with you. If you're doing diaphragmatic breathing or paced breathing, just have them do what you're doing. They like to do that thing like, how long can we hold our breath for? Let's try for 5, then let it out real slow. Keiki loved to do those things with their parent or guardian. Body sensations, you can do just a quick, like a spy check and say, what do you see? What do you hear? How do you feel? Is it cold? Is it hot? It's a spy check. You're a spy. What do you need to look for? What are you hearing? And they love to play that game, but really it's just grounding. You're saying, check in with your senses. Tell me what you're hearing, feeling, smelling, sensing. Spending time in nature. Absolutely. A lot of kids have been getting into gardening, just going outside and enjoying that fresh air. Really important for mindfulness for all of us. There's that bubble breathing. And there are some really great books available for our Keiki. That's just 2 examples on the side of books that you can use for teaching the kids mindfulness and in ways that they're going to be interested in. You will get the PDF of this, so don't worry about writing down the names. It will be there for you. I talked about the toolbox for Keiki. We do have an MHAH, some of those things already created for you. So remember when I talked to you about them pretending to be a frog or having the spy game of all those different senses? This is actually a really fun coloring sheet that we have on our website. Our website information will also be on the slide deck, but it's basically mentalhealthhawaii.org. And in this one, you're just having them color the sheet. But on the back of it, it's going to walk them through grounding. And in this one, they're just going to pretend they're a tree, that their feet are their roots. They have that really straight trunk. And then they're going to have their branches spread out, which are their arms. And then they're going to wiggle their leaves. And then with their head, that's the canopy. That's when they look around and tell me what you see, tell me what you hear. So again, it's a quick grounding exercise, but it's made easy because we give you the script, they can color the sheet, and it can just be an instant visual reminder if they're starting to feel stressed, whether or not they need to be a tree, right? Once they learn it, you can just say, do we need to be trees? Do we need to sway in the wind? Do we need to dig in our roots? So that's what I mean when I say emotional toolbox. Pick up some of these things. Don't overwhelm yourself with them, but you can pick 1 or 2 new ones to try. Some you won't like, and some you will like. And the ones you like, just add them to your toolbox. Have your Keiki added to their toolbox.
So for this slide, we'll be talking about some adolescent self-care and how we can do and how we can help. So our first bullet point is to direct to reputable sites for information. It's important now that we receive and read credible information, especially when there's so much information out there nowadays. Our second tip or second bullet point is to empower them to help. This ties back to building our sense of community, having them help one another, help out, and just building our hope for the future, because in a sense, our adolescents are our future. So it's better to empower them now rather than later, or it may be harder. Our third bullet point is to help them manage their schedules. Adolescents are notoriously bad at having healthy schedules. And this pandemic even more may have affected their schedules. So it's important that we address the schedules now rather than later, because in time, things will go back to normal and it will be easier to work on it now rather than later. Example is their sleep schedule. I talked to some adolescents who will go to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and will wake up 1 minute before their Zoom class starts. And so it's important that we address those issues now. Our next bullet point is to utilize online resources and to share them. You yourself may not need them, but it's important that we share them to get the message out, and hopefully someone who does need those resources see them so they're able to get it and get the tools that they need to process their emotions or any other things like that. Our next bullet point is responsible social media use. This can tie back to the social media sandwich that Dr. G was talking earlier. So it's important to ask yourself to contribute positivity and to filter out the negativity that comes with social media use. So we're replying to something, ask yourself the question, will my comment contribute to positivity or will it contribute to negativity? If it contributes to negativity, I advise you, please do not post that comment. But however, if it empowers and contributes to positivity, please, by all means, post that comment, be active. Our next point is recognize irritability and anger can be a depressed mood. So one common misconception about depression or feeling depressed is that you only experience feelings of sadness. That's not the case. Depression has so many levels and layers. So feeling irritability and anger is completely normal for someone feeling depressed. So how to address these, so when you do recognize it, it's important that you check in with them and use I statements. So by I statements, I mean asking I questions. What can I do to help? I noticed that you've been feeling down lately. Statements like those. And it's also important to ask the question. And so you may wonder, what question may that be? And the question is, are you thinking of taking your life? I know this may be a hard topic for many, and that's okay to feel that. It's a very difficult situation, but this dialogue, this conversation needs to happen. We need to have this conversation so to fix these problems now rather than later. We need to make sure that we do it in a safe way. One of the common misconceptions about asking the question is we'll put the idea inside their head. That's not the case. Science has shown that having a dialogue beforehand, intervention, prevention, these all play a factor in suicide prevention, that we can ask these questions to help save them before it's too late. The next bullet point is to build emotional toolboxes. As my co-presenter, Dr. G, said before, we need toolboxes, and a lot of things are online now that we can have readily access to. Thank you.
We're going to take a moment to go over some resources because we've been talking about how many resources are available online. And I'm just going to highlight our resources at Mental Health America of Hawaii. So if you're looking for that coloring sheet that we mentioned earlier, we do have some other coloring sheets for Keiki Mindfulness also available on our site. When you go to mentalhealthhawaii.org, you're going to see this Get Connected banner. Just click on that banner and it's going to take you to all of our online resources. There's some really cool printable pieces there. There's some resource sheets there. It's going to give you access to additional trainings that we do throughout the months. And so that's where all of your kind of COVID related and training and updated information is going to fall, is on that Get Connected banner. And anything that we mentioned today that's about, through us as an organization that we do, you'll find it when you click that banner. We do have some things because we've been talking about using social media in a way that enhances our life. So we do have something for our Keiki. We started this months ago and it's called our Busy Bees group. If you go to our main page, our MHA of Hawaii page, you're going to see a groups option. You're going to click on that and see the Busy Bees. We post some really cool segments in there, whether it's arts and crafts, cool animal videos of people that we know that have awesome pets. They just send it to us and then we share those pictures and videos. There's going to be like book recommendations, gardening videos, so all kinds of things, including free coloring sheets and awesome resources we find from other organizations that have things that are kid related. We absolutely share in our Busy Bees page. We just ask for adult supervision to make sure that it's safe and appropriate, but a fun place to go if you're looking for something for the kids to do. We also have a book club. This is one of my passions, obviously, is because I've mentioned the literature before, is reading. So we do have a book club also in our group section that you can go. We do book recommendations for our Keiki and for our adults every month. And we find those book recommendation lists other people create for our different seasons, and we share those there. It's just a great place to go if you're looking for something interesting, you're looking for a mental health related book, but we also share our favorite books that we just enjoy reading during this time. Like I said, sometimes, your style of reading will change because you're wanting something that's a little bit more lighter, a little bit more feel good. And so you can go here, ask that question, have other readers help you find a good recommendation. We also have on our main page, we have a lot of different pieces on our Facebook, but this is one of them where we recommend different types of movies. Either it's by the decade or it's around like a specific time of year. We will be having some upcoming like heartwarming movie recommendations for our kind of wintry season that you can look forward to finding, but we do have those on our main Facebook page. We mentioned that part of self-care is being aware of what's available. And what we do want for our community and everyone attending is to be able to have these crisis resources in case you need them. So Noah was talking just briefly about asking that question. If you or someone that you love is starting to talk about feeling unsafe, you're talking about unsafe thoughts and behaviors, we really want you to know who to call. So if it's not an immediate concern and it's just, I'm starting to think that things aren't going to change, that I feel helpless, I'm starting to think about this, but I don't have a plan, you can always call that National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can call Hawaii Cares. It's also a great one that is state specific. If there is a definite plan and it's immediate, please reach out and call 911 to get that assistance that you need as quickly as possible. But some of our other resources on our sheet is going to be the Trevor Project Hotline, and that's for LGBTQ youth for them to have support. We also have Kakua Life that's available right now through iTunes that has all of the directory for Mental Health America of Hawaii, the nonprofit agencies that we refer people out to who are looking for support in housing, in different programs. So that is on our Kakua Life app. And then, of course, we know not every home people are quarantining in is a safe place. So we wanted to make sure you have the numbers to report child abuse or neglect or trafficking, and then the Domestic Violence Action Center, and then the Sex Abuse Treatment Center. The more people have this, they can share it, and then it could be the person who needs it can find it. So this will be in your slide deck, so you'll be able to have that as a ready resource. The other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, there's two really awesome apps. They were made by the Department of Veterans Affairs and the National Council for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. I have both of them on my phone and have used both of them. We really enjoy using both of them. The COVID coach is specific to regulating your mood, tracking how you're doing, learning some new mindfulness and peaceful relaxation techniques. And you can just go in there, track and check your mood, and it will give you recommendations of things to do. It's free. That's why I love it. And it's done really, really well. Same people did CBTI, where you can track your sleep, and it also gives you recommendations for how to get better sleep. And most people's sleep has been somewhat impacted. So what great way to figure out how you're doing from week to week, and then learning new skills on how to change it. So again, here's some of those numbers that we have that could be helpful. You see DVAC, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is there as well, then our Child Abuse Reporting Hotline, one for our kapunas as well. That's that Trevor Project Lifeline. It's just in a little bit bigger text in case you have a hard time with a smaller resource sheet. And then we do have our Maui office. So if you're looking for information around Maui County, the trainings that are there, different upcoming events, this is a great place to call and to check this group specifically on our Facebook page as well to kind of get that information or share that information with that group. And then of course our main line. So that is our website, mentalhealthhawaii.org, and our phone number. You can call us if you're needing support in finding a resource in the community. So we don't provide direct services, but we do provide trainings and we do provide connections to other resources. And sometimes that's just what you need. You need to be able to call someone and say, having a hard time and I'm looking for this. Here's the number to call. I know that is a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I want to thank you so much, Noah, for joining us today. My wonderful intern, I can't give him more kudos for coming in and doing this with us. But I also want to know If you have any questions, please drop them into the chat, and Noah and I are here available to answer any that you may have. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so that I can access my chat. So yes, please feel free to drop any questions that you may have there. Okay, I see a question. The pressure, so this is the kind of the comment. The pressure to be productive is very real, and so is the guilt from doing nothing. How do you prevent depression when you're not fully doing enough of anything? Such a fantastic question. I should probably just do a whole webinar on that singular question because people bring this up frequently. And the reality is we aren't able to do everything. And being productive, I honestly, and this is kind of my personal opinion, and does come out of a very self-care heavy advocacy place for me. But the idea that being productive has to be creating something, making something, doing something, it never really emphasizes being at rest, regrounding, recentering yourself. And it should. That is also productive. I can't be running at 80 miles an hour every minute of the day. It doesn't make sense. We're not created to do that. Our nervous systems do not do well when they have that expectation. But we live in a culture where busy is good, productive is great, that you can say, I barely slept last night, but I got all this done. And people would say, great job. They wouldn't say necessarily, unless you're well trained, they wouldn't necessarily say, well, how are you feeling? You know, are you feeling more anxious? Are you having a hard time with your sleep? Like, I'm glad you got those things done. Do you have time today just to take a step outside and do some deep breathing so that tomorrow you're going to have a good day? Tonight, you're going to have better sleep. So you can see how what I'm doing is I'm shifting my idea of productive. I'm shifting my idea of what is a normal culture around busy. I won't say who, but I do have a sibling who has a tendency to post, I've been up since 6. I got these 12 things done today. And I used to comment underneath there, and I shouldn't have done it, but I used to comment underneath there like, did you go in your garden? Did you call a friend and laugh? What movies did you watch with your family? Like, I would try to like remind her, that's great. I love that you're getting things done. I need to get things done. That's just part of our day to day. But also don't forget the quiet moments or the appreciation moments. It's the gratitude moments for what you have instead of always feeling like you need to do more, make more, because that actually leaves us with feelings of right after you go, oh, look at all I did. It just feels overwhelming because there's always more stuff to do. Find that peaceful downtime to also sit back and go, that's a good job. I'm just going to relax right now.
So a question I got is, what are some of the struggles I experienced as a college student this year in trying to maintain my own wellness? So under normal circumstances pre-COVID, my life revolved around schedule, like having a schedule. Like it involved waking up at 6 o'clock, going to get my daily exercise, going to class, eating a healthy, nutritious meal, to do my homework, and then to my downtime, then to repeating the process all over again. However, during COVID, my schedule got thrown out of whack. I all of a sudden found myself with so much amount of time that I felt like I had to be productive. I was find myself struggling with it, like being productive. And so after joining the Mental Health America of Hawaii team, I've learned that being productive comes in all shapes and sizes. So something I've taken up is reinventing my schedule, adjusting it to fit COVID, which was, besides going into all my classes on time, is to have my sleep schedule back to a normalcy again. This involve going to sleep at a specific time and waking up at a specific time. So that has my experience so far is, since COVID, is readjusting my schedule.
Excellent. Thank you, Noah. We got another question. I'm just going to read it out in kind of like a more general term, but someone asked, what do I do if a relative, they're helping them with a project expects more of me than what I can do according to her standards. I'm doing my best, but sometimes feel overwhelmed and feel that she's not patient with my mental disability. How do I let her know of my feelings without ruining the relationship? That's a really excellent question, because part of this question is talking about a lack of that person's understanding of what you're able to do. And I think that's part of a lot of people struggle, is that if this were a medical condition, there would be possibly more empathy, possibly more understanding and education around it. And that some people who don't have a lived experience with mental health concerns have a much harder time understanding that there are still limitations. I'm a big proponent of making sure people around me are educated in the things that I struggle with, the things I need support with. So, one of my first recommendations, she may or may not be open to it, would just be sitting her down and really talking to her about what, as much as you're comfortable with, what that challenge looks like and how that can affect your day to day. Also, it's about setting boundaries to say, I appreciate your help. Please don't do more than you're comfortable with, but I'm also only able to do this, right? And it's really important to know that with boundaries, you start to understand that it doesn't have to be tit for tat. This doesn't have to be like an exchange. That's just an assumption that someone has, that if you do A, I'll do B. But if you really clearly outline, I'm only able to do this part of A. So please, if that's part of how you're making your decisions, what you're doing, take that into account. If you don't want to do all of this for me anymore, that's okay too. That's okay. Like, that's a favor you're doing for me. I honor and appreciate that you might make a different one now that you have this information, and try not to take that personal, and just know that sometimes people have other kinds of struggles that impact their ability to be empathetic, their ability to kind of take in information about what someone else is going through. And what you're doing is you're just trying to do your best, and appreciating the support given, but also saying, I can't give more than I have, and I'm sometimes not able to do that. It might impact the relationship, but boundaries are crucial for a healthy one. And really try to stay focused on that. And you can do everything perfect and them still have a difficult time accepting what you're saying, accepting that boundary setting, because some people do struggle with boundaries. But if you don't give them that chance to learn and that chance to grow, you won't know. You won't know what they're able to and willing to do. So that would be my recommendation. Education, and then just really outlining where you're at and what you're able to do. I'm checking messages again. Check questions. Okay. I don't see any other questions. If someone had one that we missed, please feel free to drop it into the chat again right now, so I don't want anyone to not get their question answered. But if you have one that pops up later, you can always email us at info@mentalhealthhawaii.org, and we can answer that question for you. I did just get one. Are there a set of signs to watch for to determine if a teen is needing emotional help during this pandemic time and remote learning and not experiencing their normal social life? Teens, especially boys, this is true, can be inward with their feelings. I think, Noah, you did a really great job when you were talking about that sometimes the expression of depression can look different for teens, that sometimes it's irritability, sometimes it's anger. But what I would really look for in my teenagers is sometimes teens are just irritable and angry, right? Like, I'm sorry, I was a teen, I was irritable and angry sometimes. So, like, that's not an immediate warning sign, like, that could be a Tuesday. What I would be looking for is a very profound change in their mood that is consistent and lasting for more than 2 weeks. That change in their mood is starting to impact them being able to do their schoolwork, whether or not they're spending time with their family and their friends, if it's less than what they were spending, if their relationships are looking more rocky, if their mood is getting like really irritable, angry, if they're withdrawing, isolating, if they're not able to do, and again, this happens with teenagers, hygiene, kind of comes and goes depending upon which teenager you're talking about. But if your teen was very well groomed before and they're just not, and they haven't been the last few weeks, they're just not eating well, not sleeping well, not showering, and they're just like, whatever, that's when you need to sit down and ask that question and say, how are you doing? Right? And start opening. Know that they're going to struggle. They're going to have a hard time having that conversation with you, but it's best to ask them. It's best to give them the time to really answer how they're doing. You can even let them know what you're saying. The reason I'm asking you how you're doing is I'm worried. I'm worried because I noticed you're not spending time with your friends as much. I'm worried, I know you never thought I'd say this, because you're not playing video games like you used to, and you love playing video games. And so now I'm concerned because you're not doing the things you used to love to do, that you're sleeping all day. Tell me what's happening. I need to understand it. And if you don't know what's happening, but you agree that that is happening, we need to go talk to someone. We need to get some more support. So you can say that's really specific of me looking for those types of disruptions in their life, that academic, that mood, behavior, relationships, those key points consistently for more than 2 weeks, and then opening up the conversation. If they can't like engage you, they're just struggling with it, then just saying, this is what I observe. I'm not trying to be blaming. I'm just telling you I care about you and I'm worried and this is what I'm seeing. What do you think? They could have some great reasons for it and you might be like, okay, whew, that makes sense, right? Or else they don't, and then we need to talk to someone. I'm really concerned. And if they give you any hint of any suicidal thinking or any of the behaviors they're sharing makes you really concerned, absolutely ask the question, are you thinking of killing yourself? It's not going to put it into their head, and at least you know where to go from there. If you ask the question and then you're like, what do I do now? Depending upon how urgent it is, it's 911 or the Hawaii Cares line if it's less urgent. And if you're still feeling really overwhelmed, just call us. Call us at Mental Health America of Hawaii. We can help walk you through this process of finding someone to talk to and getting the resources that you need. We're always there for you. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I don't see any other questions. Just double checking everything. I don't see any other questions, but yes, again, thank you so much for joining Noah and I today to take time out to learn a little bit about self-care and to learn about how to share that information with your family. We as a community here in Hawaii are going through so much, just like the nation and the world is. But if we can just focus in on that spirit of aloha, sharing and caring for each other, and really doing what we need to do, it makes our community more resilient. And we're definitely going to get through this together. If I could have you walk away with anything today, it would be the importance of self-care, but also having hope that we're doing what we need to do and that we are healing through all of this. Anything that you want to say, Noah?
Just thank you for being here today. Thank you all for coming. You guys are so wonderful. Hope you guys utilize this presentation and take these tools and incorporate into your daily lives. Again, thank you so much.
All right. Hello, everyone. Have a really fantastic weekend and find 5 minutes for self-care if you can.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.